Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. With me, as always, in this epic quest of awesomeness and looking a little green around the gills is our resident anime goddess, the Cat. Cat, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I can't breathe, but that's fairly normal for me. I had to do like a breathing treatment before I got on here, so like my hands are shaky because that's how steroids work for me. But then also like I'm really tired and I just want to go to bed.
All right. Well, we will try and get through this quickly for you then. And also joining us, as always, is Mike the Birdman Dodd. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing frigging fantastic. As we record this episode, it's my birthday tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to being halfway to dead and the existential crisis that will surely follow in the days and months ahead. But other than that, I'm doing great.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, we got a fun show for you guys tonight. Tonight we're doing something a little bit of an interactive show. We're doing something that I think it was Mike who proposed it, and something we thought would be really fun. We're going to pitch our own horror franchises. We're going to see if we can do a better job than the Suits in Hollywood coming up with some horror franchises. And I'm really excited because I've been stewing on this one all day. So I think I've got a really good one going here.
All right, and we are also going to be discussing Ridley Scott's Alien, my absolute favorite horror film of all time. I'm really excited for this discussion. I've been trying to get it on the docket for a couple of years, so this is really exciting for me. I'm really looking forward to this one.
So, but of course, there is procedure to follow. So we're going to start, as always, with Ask a Geek, and we got some questions here. Let's see here now. First question here comes from Pam, and it is to me, and her question is, which is a two-part question. First off, have you ever been caught up buying a fake retro game? And two, what are some ways to tell that a game is fake versus genuine? Answer the first question. Yeah, I've been caught up. I actually got caught up fairly recently. I discovered that a copy of Super Princess Peach that I had owned for a year for the Nintendo DS was actually a bootleg. And I discovered it quite by accident. I was a little pissed off, especially considering that, I'd passed the statute of limitations where I get a return on it. But I was able to find another copy elsewhere that turned out to be genuine, so now I've got a real copy. So don't feel bad that if you've been caught out buying a bootleg or a repro and not knowing it. It happens to all of us at some point. We all see something that we think is like, oh, this is a really good deal, and when am I ever going to see this again? And then picking up and then we find out we've been snookered. Now that said, I'm not opposed to people selling repros in principle, as long as they're upfront about it and they're honest about the fact that what they're selling is not the genuine article, the genuine article. Because there are some games that are just so expensive that if you're looking just for something to play, buying a repro is the cheaper option. Like, I would for example, Earthbound, which routinely goes for upwards of like $200 for just the cartridge. If you want to play Earthbound, but you're not looking to spend that much money, a repro that someone tells you up front is a repro and isn't charging $200 for it, is a good option. So like I said, I don't have a problem with reproductions on their own, but the seller's got to be honest about it, which this guy who's only Super Princess Peach was not. The second question, ways to tell genuine articles from fakes. I'm actually going to include a link in the comments below the YouTube feed of this video to a video by a guy named Metal Jesus Rocks, who he actually did a whole video with a friend of his who runs a retro game store. And they show you how you can tell whether a Nintendo game is a genuine article or if it's a bootleg, some of the telltale signs. The only ones they cover NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance. The only ones that they don't really cover in depth are Nintendo DS, and that's because Nintendo DS bootlegging is kind of just getting started, so there's not a lot of real universal telltale signs yet. God help us when Switch bootlegs start coming out. That's going to be just a total clusterfuck. But yeah, no, don't feel bad if you got caught out, picking up a repro or bootleg and not realizing it. Like I said, it happens to all of us. We all get tripped up eventually. It's sort of a rite of passage in the game collecting community. Where it's like, you find what you think is a really good deal, and it turns out someone got took you for a ride. So as long as it didn't you put you out of too much money, don't feel too terribly bad about it.
Well, I think if you're buying anything retro and you're spending any significant amount of money, especially online, you have to be careful. In fact, the pandemic, I think, is going to lead to more bootlegs and stuff being out there, because places like eBay and whatnot, you can be very easily taken in by a misleading seller, probably like you were, because you won't know unless you can inspect the cartridge, take it apart, look at the screws, etc., to see what they are. And I know CD bootlegging has been a thing for quite some time. It's really easy to fake Sega CD games, for example. So it's going to be a problem, as you said. Don't feel too bad, but it is getting worse out there, which is really unfortunate. I mean, like with you, I'm in the same mindset of, I don't mind repros in principle. In fact, I've actually had a few repros. I sold an Ogre Battle, I think it was, for my friend Alex. And I had a repro of a game that only came out in Japan for the Super Nintendo. It was the Gundam Wing fighting game, but I had the person who burned me the board for it apply the English patch to it. So I had a completely original game to me, and I could play it on original hardware, which I thought was really, really, really fantastic. So something like that I think is cool. But also, like I said, buying Earthbound, if I can pay $50 for someone's time and parts, I'm fine with that, as opposed to paying $200 for a genuine article or tracking down like a Wii U to play it on emulation or something.
Yeah. And there are things that you can do to kind of keep yourself on your toes, make sure that what you're buying is genuine. And again, it's all covered in that video. So like I said, when I put this up on the YouTube feed, I'll immediately stick a comment underneath it that I'll pin, which will have a link to that video. So because doing the research on what is and is not a genuine Nintendo game is something that's important to know, because Nintendo games tend to be the ones that are bootleg the most. You don't see a whole lot of bootlegs and repros for Sega games, or even PlayStation games. Nintendo seems to be the big one, especially Pokemon games. But there are things that you can do to protect yourself and be informed. And like I said, getting caught out, it's a rite of passage in the collecting community. So you've got that box ticked now. So now you'll know to be on your toes in the future. And let's see here now. Next question here. See, we have one here from it just says Ori. So I don't know if that's the actual name or a real name. And this one goes to Kat. And the question is, if you could hold a con in any city of your choice, what would it be?
Oh dear, that's a really good question. Because from a con runner standpoint, the cooler the city, the more expensive it's going to be. So like, if there was no budget and I could just, have any kind of convention in any city, oh god, where would I want it to be? Not Chicago. Chicago is garbage. Is there a city that has good anything? Like,
I can think of one.
like
if I was in Las Vegas, because it's got pretty good public transit that I'm aware of, tons of convention centers, easy to rent out spaces that I'm aware of, and there's always something to do 24/7. But then you run into age gating.
Yeah, and
if go ahead. If I were to put one forward, I would suggest Seattle, Washington, because since you have both Microsoft and Nintendo both have their headquarters in Seattle, you have a huge geek scene. So you would have an immense customer base to start with, and one that's already there in the city and established, as opposed to people having to travel from out of town.
Doesn't PAX Prime, isn't that based out of Seattle?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Where else would be cool? Because you want food, you want parking, you want something to do.
Well, I think Kat had an idea that she was about to put forward.
Yeah, sorry, Kat.
See, my very first thought was actually Seattle, and I think it's really just because I've always wanted to do a convention in Seattle. But I don't know, there's got to be like somewhere in Canada that's good. Like, because the problem with America is that a lot of so like I do mostly anime conventions, and anime conventions have a much younger crowd. Like, you're looking at teenagers. A lot of like low and high teens make up the bulk of the people who are going to be there. So you have to be in some place very, very safe, so that if a pack of them is traveling on public transit, that they're not gonna die. And so this is why I don't like Chicago and a couple of these other towns, is these are just not the safest cities in the world. Like, my friends and I would take the public transit up to Otakon in Baltimore, and it was like, why did our parents ever let us do this? This is not a good idea. So someplace like in Canada, maybe during the summer, would probably be really actually pretty nice.
One of the conventions that pretty much is like what you would describe used to be formerly known as Con Bravo, which ran out of Hamilton, formerly Burlington. That was held in Burlington, and then Hamilton later on. It was held in the Hamilton Convention Center, but before that it was held in a Burlington hotel. And it was fairly easy to get to, especially the Hamilton location, because it was right downtown. The Hamilton transit system was really good. There was food everywhere. There was a mall right beside the convention center for food, accommodations. You could literally, the hotel was attached right to the convention center via this kind of sky bridge, and it was fantastic. Like, it ran really successfully. The problem with that is you got locked into a contract with the convention center, which means like certain vendors couldn't be there. There's a lot of these really weird restrictions that I found about it. Toronto and area has Anime North, which is held in Mississauga. The biggest problem is that it's got not a lot near it, but its hotels and its area is very safe. Plus, it's relatively easy to get to once you get the hang of it. A city I'd love to see develop a convention scene. If you had to pick a city, a smaller city, really quaint, it's a place called Barrie, which is about an hour and a half north of Toronto. Gorgeous looking city, lots of food, lots of culture. Don't know about venues though. And the city I'm in, Guelph, might not be a bad one either, because we have a pretty big university here, which means there's a lot of younger kids. There's a lot of kids who have a lot of disposable income. So you probably want these people. So I don't know. I mean, those would be the places I'd put forth. People might suggest Vancouver and Calgary. Vancouver's got a very easy transit system, a lot of good food. Calgary, also very good transit. Edmonton, not so much. Yeah, those would be my picks.
Okay, if I wasn't worried about safety or public transit, because I don't know what the public transit is, I'd want to have a convention in New Orleans. Because I've run conventions out of 2 cities in Louisiana, and the food is unbelievable. And one of my friends offered to let me come work with him down at MechaCon, and I just never did. And what a tragedy, because I never got to do a con in New Orleans, and I would really, really love to do that. Just for the food, like as somebody who works primarily, and by primarily I mean exclusively, with guests, that is a guest's paradise where you can take them out and like go to a cool place for dinner and have like the best food ever. That's what I would want to do.
Yeah,
as an attendee, I don't even have a concept of what I'd want as an attendee, but as a con runner, I'd love to have one in New Orleans.
Yeah, the food in New Orleans. Oh God, I want to go visit New Orleans just for the food alone. You ever see that? It was floating around on YouTube and social media for a while. It went viral for a bit. It's a clip from The Simpsons, and it's called Homer Eats His Way Through New Orleans, and it basically lists like 40 different New Orleans specialty dishes, and it just all sounds so good. I'm just like, oh God, I want to go to New Orleans just to try some of these things.
I got real spoiled going to conventions in like Lafayette, because I could find I found some like hole in the wall places that had like the best fried chicken I've ever had in my life, and I will never find fried chicken that good. But like blackened gator, like crawfish étouffée. Oh my God, I'm so hungry just thinking about this.
All right, let's see here now. Let's see. Do we have one here from you, Mike? Let's see here now. Okay, actually, here's one here that I'm going to open up to you. It's addressed to me, but it's one that I'm going to open up to you. And this one is from Donovan, and his question is, what is the most awesome game collector's edition that you've ever seen? So I know you've seen some pretty wild ones, Mike. So let's start with you on this one.
I'd say the most awesome one that I've seen, it'd probably be Titanfall 2 with the helmet. The build quality on that thing looked phenomenal. Like Respawn Entertainment really knocked it out of the park with that kind of cosplay level collector's edition. And I saw a couple of my influencer friends get them as gifts, and I thought they looked pretty fantastic. For the collector's edition that most people could get their hands on if they were quick on the pre-order button, I'd say the Call of Duty Juggernog fridge for Call of Duty Black Ops 3 was pretty useful. It's a workable mini fridge. I used it to store my insulin for like a couple of years, and I was able to resell it for like triple the price. I'm trying to think of what else. Almost any of the Halo Legendary editions, although everybody will remember the cat helmet as the most memorable. The worst of the collector's editions, for Halo would probably be number 4. It was just really lame. Although Fallout 4 deserves special mention in coolest collector's editions because it's a wearable Pip-Boy that you could download an app from the store, and you could control your in-game avatars like
inventory management.
Yeah, you could do that if you wore the Pip-Boy at the same time. That is levels of interactivity and fun I've never seen before. And I always thought Bethesda did a fantastic job with that.
Let's see. For me, oh god, some of the wildest collector's editions I've ever seen. I think the one that's just the most out there. It was one that I don't think anyone ever purchased, but it was a genuine item that was put up for sale. No one ever bought it, but it was for Saints Row 4. And
I know the one you mean.
It was the Millionaires Edition, and it cost literally $1 million. And it had I can't I've got to look this up now because there was just so much to it, and it was almost like it was Wu-Tang Clan that did the album that they only released like 4 people.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. The Super Dangerous Wad Edition, aka the $1 Million Pack, came with Saints Row 4 Commander-in-Chief Edition, a Virgin Galactic space flight, a full-size replica dubstep gun, a hostage rescue experience, plastic surgery, spy training day, personal shopper. Half of these are just bullshit, I'm sure. But a Lamborghini Gallardo. There was like so much stuff that was packed into this that I just like, a year supercar membership, new Toyota Prius plus 1 year's insurance. It was clearly a joke put out by Deep Silver, but no, they actually put this thing out, and I don't think anyone ever bought it because who's got $1 million to just burn? But as far as stuff that's sheer wild and out there, that's probably the wildest one I've ever seen. In the realm of the more attainable, I think the Duke Nukem Forever Balls of Steel edition was a close second. I think that was the one that came with like a solid metal bust of Duke. Let's see, Balls of Steel edition. Let's see here now, because I'm pulling it up here.
It came with like a comic book, a poker chip.
Yeah, okay, poker chip dice, a deck of cards, and yeah, a full size bust of Duke Nukem. So that's another one that's really wild and out there. Now, as far as ones that are in my collection, my favorites are actually right now it's a tie between the Persona 5 Royal Phantom Thieves edition, which came with a replica of Joker's mask, and it's not a cheap plastic one either. It's actually a real high quality ceramic mask. I was surprised by that, so I've got that. And then also, this is one that I went really hard for. That was the Xenoblade Chronicles Collector's Edition from Europe, which came with the game, an art book, a keychain, and a full-size vinyl soundtrack, which for some reason we did not get here in America. And I just went absolutely nuts watching Amazon UK trying to get a pre-order in on it, and I think I got like the very last one, and I had to ship it to a friend of mine who forwarded it to me, and it took like a month and a half to get here because customs. So now, lamest collector's edition, since Mike opened the floodgates on that one, the one that I think was probably collector's edition I think I was probably the most disappointed in. It was one of the Call of Duties, and I think the only thing that it came with was like some skins that were later released as paid DLC, I think like 6 months later. And I was like, really? That's nothing.
I know Call of Duty World at War had a water canteen that you literally couldn't drink from. That was fucking stupid. And I wondered, why did you bother to print this? But yeah, that was pretty fucking lame. Although last year's Call of Duty had better night vision goggles than Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2's, which I will say, COD at least gives you useful things outside of useless skins most of the time.
And so with that, we're going to roll right into the meat of this episode. And for this week's topic in our Halloween Spooktacular Marathon, we are going to pitch our own horror franchises. So basically the rule is we basically have to come up with our own horror franchise. It could be a movie, TV show, whatever. And we have to explain how it works, pitch the idea, and then the rest of us can kind of critique it and offer, praise or criticism for the idea. So I'm going to go ahead and go first because I am actually really excited about my idea. So I call my horror franchise Clickbait. And the basic way that it works is there's this evil spirit that manifests itself. It lives in the internet. So I guess you say it manifests itself as a computer virus or something. And it sends people emails or social media messages, hey, check this out. And it's usually, when you click it and open it, it's some disturbing, creepypasta image like Jeff the Killer or Slender Man or Goatsy or something kind of really disturbing, and then you look at that and you don't think anything of it. But then after opening that file, your body starts to you're basically killed in a way that is related to whatever was in the image or video that you were sent. So say for example, if you open up and you got Jeff the Killer, your body physically and graphically changes so that you wind up having that that foot wide smile of Jeff the Killer. If it's a Slender Man thing, your body's forcibly stretched out to you're 8 feet tall, and you're basically killed in horrific ways that in some way that's related to the image or video that was in the attachment that you saw. And the backstory behind this is the spirit is actually the ghost of a little boy who drowned, and his death actually became one of these viral stories that you see shared around on social media. And he's not too happy about that, so he's taking his vengeance on the world by basically hijacking these viral social media, phenomenons and killing people through them. So it's almost sort of like a digital version of The Ring. The other idea that I was toying with, but I thought it was kind of dumb, was maybe an alien invasion is using viral social media posts to brainwash people into becoming their soldiers and kind of like invasion the body snatch sort of thing. But I felt like I seem to remember that being done somewhere before. So, but the idea of a killer spirit using social media to murder its victims, I think was really cool. So yeah, that's the basic bones of my idea. So questions, comments, criticism.
It sounds like Creepypasta the movie. That's not a bad thing. So you've essentially took The Ring, brought it into the digital age, which again, not a terrible idea. I think it's got a lot of potential. I think you'd have to rework it to be, instead of being a little boy, to being a teenager who was maybe obsessed with Reddit and YouTube, and maybe they were into some darker shit. And when they killed themselves, or maybe they were murdered, this is how their curse or their anger is manifested in the world. Maybe, I don't know, if you want to take a product placement angle with it, maybe their dad was an engineer at Google or something, and they killed themselves in a Google server room, giving them access to the internet. This way, you're providing a logical story point for this person to kind of make it out into the World Wide Web, such as it may be. Or to take your idea and maybe turn it a little bit on its head. place the story in the early 1990s or in the 90s, just when like these weird stories are starting to come out. Like, do you remember the story about the Legend of Zelda with the hidden room and all the weird kind of creepypasta that came out of that?
You're talking about Ben drowned? Yeah, that's actually where I got the idea for this. Was like, you know, what if this is something that actually happened and Ben was like not happy that you know, his story is basically being used for 4chan bait.
Yeah, like I genuinely think you've got something here. I would work it out, and I wouldn't do it as a movie. I would do it as a very limited series, 3 or 4 episodes, super high budget, and I'd put it on a network like Shudder, where you can crank up the gore, you can attract the right kind of directors and producers for it, and you could really have some creative fun with it and expand your story over the course of 3 hours, as opposed to only having, say, an hour and a half, which is your typical horror movie.
Okay. Kat, your thoughts?
I like this idea because if it's about clickbait, it's just gonna kill boomers. Like, it's not gonna kill millennials, because millennials are just like, nah, I'm not gonna click on this shit. Like,
it's population control.
It's population control. Like, it's terrible to say, but like certain demographics and groups of people are more likely to click on clickbait links. And there's a lot of us, like our generation, are trained to know, oh, that's clickbait. I'm not clicking on that. I'll go find another article to read. So like, it's gonna hit some communities more than others.
Gonzo's movie killed Grandma. The unintentional hilarity.
A Nigerian prince shows up out of the computer to offer you money.
My God, that would be a great gag kill. That would be wonderful. Or if not, fucking Betty White shows up, because you ever notice how Betty White tends to die like every couple of weeks?
Yeah.
There we go. We got Nigerian Prince and Betty White in your movie. Star power.
Well, see,
I'll say about your pitch here, Gonzo, is that it feels very much like there's been some more recent, over the last like 5 years or so, trends of like social media related horror films. Like there was a movie like Unfriended or something. Like every year or so there's some movie that comes out that's like, oh, a teenager died because of social media, and now they're haunting social media. And it's really hard to determine whether or not these movies are coming out as a warning against the horrors of social media, or if it's just at a desperate power grab to just like, oh, we need something that's relevant to the teenager. Social media, that's all they care about. We'll put that in there. So like, I guess I'm trying to figure out like, okay, is this sort of an overplayed pitch? Is this something that we've already seen before and is sort of exploitative of our times? Or is this like a different target demographic?
I mean, as to whether that's exploited or not, like I said, I've never watched any of the movies that you described, because I'm not a big horror movie guy in general. But this is just something that sort of came to me because I'm really big into this thing called the SCP Foundation, and it's basically just a collection of creepypastas, which are basically, for those who don't know, they're basically little short pieces of horror fiction that are hosted online. And I thought, what if some of this stuff, like, was actually real and actually happened? And then I kind of took that one step further. Like, what if this was stuff that could actually like affect you? Like, if you read the story about like, Jeff the Killer, he wound up visiting you that night and attacking you, or if like, playing Slender wound up making Slender Man manifest outside of your home. So it was sort of this idea of, what if creepypasta actually could do you physical harm. The reason why I titled it clickbait was less of a dig at people sharing BuzzFeed articles on Facebook, and more just for the fact that it's a name that has more reach. You tell your average person, hey, you ask your average person, hey, you want to go see this movie called Creepypasta? They're gonna look at you like, well, that's a dumbass name. you ask someone if you want to go see a movie called Clickbait, you know, they're going to immediately have an idea sort of what the film is going to be about, and it's something that they actually know. So the use of clickbait as the title was really just more for, you know, it's a more common term than creepypasta. So that was why I chose clickbait.
You could definitely call it the dark web.
Oh, that's good.
Ooh, I didn't even think of that.
Because that is more... It is just as wrong as calling it clickbait, but is spooky.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, because wouldn't that be so good? You're like, ooh, we're going to get on the dark web, and it's creepypasta, but not trademarked.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, all right. Yeah, I didn't think about calling it the dark web. Ooh, okay, yeah, that is a good idea. All right. Okay, so that's my pitch. Let's see now. Mike, let's hear yours.
Okay, so my pitch is not necessarily for a movie. I'm going to turn this into an HBO limited series because I want budget, I want freedom, I want the ability to hire who I want, when I want, and to not be questioned with my creative vision. So, my thing is a mix between, picture Cyberpunk 2077, so high-tech future, but high-tech and low-life, but I want it to meet Cthulhu. So, basically, subtitled Cthulhu Punk, I'm calling this series Wetworked. And this series follows a pair of private investigators set in the year 2170 in Toronto, because why the hell not? It follows the street enforcer and problem solver team of Warren and Cassandra. Both of them are cybernetically augmented humans. Warren is a street-level operator who has befriended Cass because she works for and with the cops on occasion. The story begins. Think about a 10-episode series where a family approaches them to help solve a mystery involving their murdered daughter and their missing son. So, season 1 would follow the trail of a cult named the Yellow Faith and the Missing Son. A corporation named Citadel has taken an interest in the investigation and occasionally helps and/or hinders both of them. The antagonists for the series usually involve gang members or organ leggers, the cops, or the cult of the Yellow Faith itself. Now, strange occurrences start to happen, and the Cthulhu mythos elements become more apparent when more cult members rise from the dead, for example. For example, they'll be in a gunfight, and one of them decides to randomly get up from being filled with like 50 shots from like a shotgun or something. Some really big moments in the series is where you bring out the big monsters from the kind of mythos. And I'm not talking things you've seen on Lovecraft Country with like, the Star Spawn of Cthulhu or Shoggoths or anything. I want to focus on other monsters, more specifically Bakis. I think that's how you pronounce it. Either way, there are these flying winged creatures that look pretty friggin' terrifying. So one of the things that will happen in one of the episodes is there's going to be a corporate strike force. Think of like your typical Black Ops guys with like the night vision goggles, the big ass guns, and they're going into a place to go raid it. And they stumble across these creatures and they're like, what the hell is that? So they start opening fire. Nobody comes out of it alive. All that's left is like security cam footage, which gets sent back to Citadel and Cass and Warren. They're like, what the hell did we just see? To introduce other elements which may be picked up later in the series, if there's a season 2, is they focus on another Lovecraftian monster known as the fungi from Migo, which are basically alien brains that harvest precious metals. They have human servants. They have an interest in the human world for reasons that obviously we can't understand, because that's just not the way the world operates when it involves Lovecraftian elements. It also involves some other monsters like a flying polyp and whatnot. Basically, I want it to be very visually striking. When these monsters show up, you know they're weird. You know all the guns and chrome in the world won't make a difference at times. But you know what? Sometimes a minigun might get the job done. So the series is going to end with a hooded yellow figure. He's going to emerge from the darkness leading the missing son off to places unknown, and Warren and Cass are going to be critically injured from a firefight from Citadel corporate security and one of these monsters. Basically, they get caught in a three-way crossfire. And it turns out the figure in yellow is an avatar of a Lovecraftian god known as Hastur. And he is always depicted in various forms, but never, or at least very, very rarely in human form. So why has this individual been taken under his wing? What is the purpose? And I actually have a cast list for this. And this is probably a little bit reminiscent of something I did on another Twig show a few months ago. But I'm casting in the role of Warren McGrath, one of my favorite actors of all time, Ice-T, because I love him in Law and Order. Cassandra Gibbons, I'm casting the girl who was the judge in Judge Dredd, the one from 2012 with Carl Urban. The supporting cast, the cult leader, is a guy named David. I'm casting Brad Dorff as the voice. He was the voice of Chucky, plus he'll do anything in this industry if you pay him enough money and, pay his catering. And finally, the voice of Hastur, I would love to cast Michael Ironside because I love him as Darkseid in anything DC. And that's Sam Fisher for a little bit of additional kind of nerd cred. And season 2, if they survive the firefight between Citadel and the monsters, it turns out this is all part of a larger plot involving another outer god from the Cthulhu mythos known as Nyarlathotep, who is the dark man of 1,000 faces. I think that's what his proper title is. But I'm going to very lean heavily into the supernatural in the season 2, whereas season 1 is going to be mixing the two a little bit more to get people acclimatized to the idea. Strange things are happening in the world that man is not meant to understand. So that's my pitch for 10 episodes on HBO.
So, wow, you really put some thought into this.
Oh, yeah. I want to wow people. If we are getting Lovecraft Country, goddamn, now is the time to open the Lovecraftian Lovecraftian floodgates.
So, okay, so this is my question. Do you think Lovecraft, now with Lovecraft County being out, do you think Lovecraftian stuff is more accessible now? Would that be an easier thing to sell to a studio or to whoever to get somebody to scoop that up?
I think so, because there always has been Lovecraftian horror movies. Like there's been the Unnameable, From Beyond, Reanimator, the Necronomicon, which I think was directed by Ronnie Yu. So there's always been people in this space, but getting a big time studio to back it before HBO was exceptionally rare. Now with Lovecraft Country hitting so hard and being so critically well received, you could do that and you could tell a different story, because Lovecraft Country is a period piece that happens at a very specific time in American history. Why not bring that into the far future with cyberpunk? Like another great visual would be to this. Picture Blade Runner 2049 and add monsters to it. And I think that would be a real selling point. Yes, it's going to be very, very special effects heavy, but it would get people to sign up for HBO Max. Like, can you imagine? Let's say I couldn't get Ice-T. Let's say somebody wanted to piggyback off the success of Cyberpunk 2077, because let's admit that's going to sell PS5s and Xbox Series X's like nobody's business. Let's say they cast Keanu Reeves for 10 episodes. They're going to be like, Johnny Silverhand fighting monsters? Why take my money, HBO Max? It'll happen.
I like the juxtaposition of the cyberpunk elements with Lovecraftian elements, because I'm just imagining, like, the joke with Lovecraft stuff is you always burn the book. You never read the book. You always burn it. And the idea, and another big major trope is people going insane from exposure to these supernatural elements. And I love the idea of some of these things like, you know, maybe instead of reading the book, it's opening the file. Don't open the file. And especially if we're talking about, you know, people with cybernetic enhancements, there's bound to be somebody with a and something just fell off my shelf here. What the fuck was that? I'll figure it out later. There's bound to be somebody who's got a hard drive in their head, and maybe they're storing a copy of the Necronomicon or something, and it starts like whispering to them in like, you know, a notepad file in their brain or something, or rewriting their mental code. And I really just like seeing that sort of juxtaposition of the computerized elements with the supernatural elements. I think there's a lot of potential here to actually kind of do something new with Lovecraft, because so much of it is like, oh, it's the 1800s, Shadow of Innsmouth. Yeah, okay, we've, you know, Abandoned Asylum. We've seen this 100 times before. We've never seen, you know, Call of Cthulhu and Blade Runner before. So this would be something actually a neat little mashup.
Yeah, like that's kind of what I wanted to go for, especially since I'm setting it in near future as opposed to far future with, like, say something like, say, Star Trek. We're just getting into exploring the solar system in Lovecraftian fiction. The Mi-Go, the fun guy from Yugoth is Pluto. They have outposts in our solar system. It is not outside the realm of possibility for us to discover a colony of these things living on the planets. Or, as I mentioned, as my bad guys in the series, one monster of the week is organ leggers. Why are organ leggers stealing people's spleens? You know what I mean? What are they using them for? So I want that weird juxtaposition where we've never seen chrome and a dusty old book meet in the same room. Like, I want that weird street level action, but I want high concept cosmic horror.
Okay. All right. So Kat, seems like it's your turn now. What have you got cooked up?
Okay, I have no title for mine because I haven't developed it to the point where I could come up with a title for it, but I came up with an idea for a short horror anime, because it's me, so I've got to do the anime stuff. So I have an idea where you'd have like a short, like a 12 episode series, so a limited run series, just one season, set in a rural town in Japan, so not in a big city. And various people are haunted by different ghosts or demons or whatever. I don't have ideas yet for all of the ghosts and demons, but the idea would be that every story sort of overlaps the previous story. So one episode would focus on one character and their problem and their thing, and whether or not it kills them, or they figure out, you know, whatever they've got to do to stop getting haunted, or if they have a solution or not. Whatever happens in an episode. So it's self-contained. And then the second episode would be a different person, a different story, but you'd see like a minor amount of overlap. Just, you know, like these two characters from the first episode and the second episode would bump into each other or something like that. And you just get to see just a little hint of what that other person looks like in their episode to an outsider from the person in the second episode. And so just have these stories be really interconnected, which I think would make sense in like a small town setting. And granted, small town Japan is very different than small town America. And so like I have the stories themselves, I really like the idea of basing them off of, you know, you've probably seen them around on the internet, but on Reddit a few years ago, they started a trend of like, come up with a horror story in 2 sentences. And I like the idea of pulling story ideas from that Reddit and just going, yes, perfect. Here we go. I'll turn that into a story. And I don't know how you'd credit somebody for that, but you just take one of these 2-episode horror or 2-sentence horror stories and turn that into an entire episode about something. So there are a lot of like, oh, I didn't realize I was dead and I was going about my business, or something like that. And there would be a central character who is like a coffee shop employee or somebody who would interact with all of these random people from the town. So like a taxi driver or a coffee shop employee or somebody like that who would have a reason to see everybody just a little bit. And then that person would be the one who figures out, so that central character would be the one who figures out why all of this stuff is happening. And my idea for why it would be happening would be that, like a lot of towns, there would be like a small shrine outside of town that somebody had actually accidentally destroyed at some point before all these hauntings took place. And so that main character spends the final episode in whatever kind of great horrific peril, but then decides, I'm going to fix this, and repairs the shrine. And then whatever protective spirit that should have been protecting the town comes back, and then all of the hauntings stop and everything's fixed and it's better. But like all the damage up to that point would have already been done. So I think it would be really fun to have something like this, because it can be as dark and brutal as you want it to be, or it can be a little lighter than that. It can involve different age groups and different settings within the town, without feeling really redundant. And I like the idea of just these stories overlapping a little bit. Because I'd like to make a show like the anime Another without being quite so Final Destination. Because it's basically if Final Destination were an anime about school kids. And it's really fucked up in that regard. So I want to have something that can be really intense, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, but episodic and still feeling like it's the same setting and place and everything. And that's my idea. I don't have a name for it yet. I figured I would be able to come up with a name for it because anime usually have these ridiculous names. So I'd figure out something by the time I made up all the stories.
Okay.
Right. I've got some questions. Did you mention what time period this takes place in?
It would be like modern time.
Okay, so I think one of the advantages of your idea is you could flex time with this. Like you could have episodes set whenever. Your idea is so flexible. You're not tied into this must take place in 2020. You could throw this in the 80s, the 70s. You could even throw this in the 1800s if you wanted to, or whatever. Your idea itself is so flexible, and I really love that idea. Now, this is more from a production standpoint, but it would lead to how you would tell the story. How long are your episodes? Are you doing your standard half hours, or would you do like a full 45 minutes?
It would be a standard half hour because I'm pitching it as an anime, and that's just how animes do.
Okay. Do you have a voice cast in mind?
No, God, no, I didn't even get there. Like, I just sort of came up with, like, there's a central character who's gonna fix everything by the end. No real concept for what that character is. But probably, like, some female coffee shop employee who's just, like, a normal person who just sees a bunch of, like, weird stuff.
I actually kind of want to...
I don't want it to... I have this, like... these two images, like these two feelings, and I don't think either of you have seen either of these two anime, but I like the simplicity of Natsume's Book of Friends, which is not quite a horror, but is very supernatural, but then like the level of darkness of Another, and you kind of put those two together and you go, ooh, that would be an interesting mishmash of like ghosts and supernatural stuff. Meshed with like Final Destination brutality.
I want to zero in on the coffee house character, and kind of introduce an idea. Maybe what if instead of making them the main protagonist, maybe make them the framing device. Like maybe the person who's going to solve all the problems is an out of towner who's coming in, and the coffee shop employee or bartender or whatever is telling them these stories about the strange goings on in the town, and then the final episode is the out of town detective putting everything together, and then he or she does what needs to be done to fix the town. And this is something that just occurred to me just now. The final twist is that the coffee shop owner who's been telling all these stories is actually part of the supernatural force that's been plaguing this town.
See, that's not really the whole thing, though. So my idea is to have the coffee shop employee as like the framing device, in that they're kind of getting pieces of the story. Here's this problem, or here's this person, and they have that problem, and this other person seems to have this problem, just based on snippets of how they act or behave or conversations they overhear with other people just inside the coffee shop. So then they're like, oh wow, and then they start to put the pieces of the puzzle together by like the final episode, and then they go, I think I know how to solve this. And
So
then
it's
they
like
go
a-
through and fix it.
So it's like a reverse Tales from the Crypt Keeper. Instead of the Crypt Keeper telling the stories, people are telling the stories to the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah, in a very unsophisticated way. This coffee shop employee would basically just be like overhearing stuff or just seeing a regular customer and go, oh, they look like they haven't gotten sleep for a while. And just like putting the pieces together little by little to figure out that something's really, really wrong.
Okay.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I like the idea. It feels like an anime that I've already seen, but I don't know what anime I would have already seen like this. Maybe it's a little bit mushishi. I'm just naming anime you guys haven't seen, but it's a little bit mushishi.
I've seen bits and pieces of that one.
It's such a good spooky series without being super spooky. But like, I want something that's spookier than that.
I think you could do this. I would put it on Netflix. Okay, this is going to be such an out there question. What do you see the sound design being for this? Like, how would you want the music for this thing to be? Because I find that, because with horror, you have to have the proper sound. What would you do for that? Like, would you want like a full orchestra kind of doing this? Would you settle for like your standard kind of anime soundtrack type of thing? Or how do you want this to be present? How do you want to set atmosphere? Purely visuals, or how would your sound kind of play into this?
First off, I think my dream team for where I'd want it is I would want the studio to be Brainspace, who did Bacano, because that is a really, really good show and the animation is really pretty.
Okay. I dig this.
I think I would I don't want it to be like a shonen anime where they have like a really hyped up intro and then like a downer sort of ending song. I think I'd really just want like quiet orchestral kind of stuff, like probably actually not that much music going on. Like I'd want a lot of like natural soundscapes in it. So like in the coffee shop, there'd be like the clinking of glasses and the murmur of people talking, and then maybe like a tinny radio or something like that. And just using the environment of whatever is the location of each episode to sort of inform the soundscape, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I dig it. I mean, I really think this is it's a good idea that does have a lot of possibilities. It doesn't seem like it would be expensive to produce. You've got a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to cast it, and I like how you're describing your use of sound being very kind of minimalist, but working with a high quality animation studio that can help set that particular tone, which I think, at least in my limited experience with like scary anime, it either flirts the line between being over the top ridiculous or being incredibly well done. And I think yours has the potential to be really wide appeal and draw people in, and yet people that are like horror nerds and horror anime nerds would probably dig it too.
Yeah, just trying to keep that rating down without being like too scary, because anime can have such a wide variety for its audience. But I don't want something quite as brutal as another, but maybe have that same sort of melancholy that Mushishi has, while still being like really scary and messed up. And like, there's a lot of really scary stuff you can do in anime without being ultra violent. So I really feel like this would be a good medium for... Well, I don't watch that much horror anime because, quite frankly, like, I don't enjoy horror that much. And I think like my idea, the way I have it pitched in my head, would be like a more balance so that it's not too scary for the people who don't like horror, and you can just watch it and have a nice episodic series that has a lot of characters and you can just do a lot with it.
Man, that koala just ruined you for horror anime, didn't it?
God, fuck that fucking koala, man. God, don't. I don't like horror to begin with, but that fucking Mantis Woman manga really fucked me up. God.
Okay, all right. Well, we're coming down to the wire here, so let's sort of wrap things up by giving each other some small prizes for our pitches. So let's see. I'm gonna award Mike the prize for most thought out, because damn, dude, like I listen to your pitch. I have expected you to start asking me for, like, you know, a budget or something, like what kind of money you could expect. And I'm just like, dude, this is a podcast. You know, I'm not actually a studio head, but like you like went into such detail with your pitch, and it's pretty clear that you were cooking that dish for a while. So like, kudos to you for the level of thought and detail in your pitch. And I love like I said, I love the juxtaposition of the cybernetic with the supernatural, and I'd be really fascinated to see that actually play out on the screen.
If I had to award something, I'm going to award Cat with being the most budget friendly and casting friendly. And I mean that in the nicest sense, meaning that if you had the right studio people collaborating with the producers, you wouldn't get a lot of red tape here, because the story with Cats, it's so flexible. And the way when Gonzo said, it's like you're telling the story to the Crypt Keeper. That's what sealed it for me. Thinking, all right, you only need to have your central coffee center lead. Everybody else is very, very, very flexible. So you can bring in people that are known to be character actors, which that's going to lower your cost, but that can bring up quality. If you're like, hey, this person plays a really awesome crazy person, this person plays a really good old woman, you've got a lot of flexibility there, and you could pitch this to a series like, say, Shudder, and they don't have any anime. This could be a premier series for them, and this should be a way for them to enter the streaming market when it comes to anime. So I think Cat's idea has the most potential to go to series.
Okay.
And I will give Gonzo the award for most accessible to an actual audience, whereas Birdman and I both have like pretty our ideas are like, mine would mainly appeal to anime fans, and Birdman's are going to be like, well, you got to know a little bit about Lovecraft to even get interested. Yours is like, everybody indulges in the web and social media, and these are things that like literally anybody could go in and understand without having to like think too hard about. So I think yours is the most likely to actually appeal to the widest possible, widest, not whitest, although probably that too, widest possible audience.
Alrighty, well, I appreciate that. All right, and so with that, we're gonna turn over to you guys. Whose pitch did you like? So go ahead and sound off in the comments. Let us know. And so with that, we're gonna jump right into the meat of this episode, and I am really excited about this because we are discussing my absolute favorite horror film of all time. It is the only one that still scares me today after watching it 100 times, as it did when I watched it the very first time at the tender age of 10 years old. Why did my father let me rent that movie at that age? I don't know. Ridley Scott's Alien. And I don't even know where to begin with my admiration of this film, so we're just gonna launch right into the story synopsis, which I'm sure everyone knows. A group of basically space truckers intercept a distress signal, this unknown planet. They go down to investigate and wind up bringing back with them this creature that gestates inside a living host, bursts out of one of their crew members' chests, and begins systematically slaughtering them one by one, until finally only Sigourney Weaver's Ripley remains. She blows the alien out into space. Happy ending. Cue massive horror franchise. And there's also a cat in there somewhere. But it's so hard for me to just convey what I love about this film, because there's just so much. And I guess part of the reason why I wanted to do this is because I really wanted to unpack why it is I love this film so much. So we're just gonna go ahead and just start into it. And just to be clear, we're discussing just the first Ridley Scott's Alien. We're not discussing the Aliens franchise or any of the sequels or spinoffs, because if we do that, we'll be here all fucking day. So we're just keeping limited to just the first film. So I guess let's just start with Mike. What is it about this film that draws you to it after so many years?
I'd say for me, it's particularly the design of the alien xenomorph creature itself. I've always been a fan of H.R. Geiger's work since I saw Aliens in 1987 or 88 on VHS. I didn't see Alien until probably I was in high school in like the mid 90s or so. And it's the first time I'd seen the alien be threatening on a one-on-one situation, because the alien in Alien is a different type than the one we see in Aliens. The one we see in Alien is a drone. That's a simple worker alien. This isn't one built to fight, yet it wiped out an entire crew in less than 24 hours with just its teeth, claw, and its tail. I'd never seen anything look so biomechanical yet insectile at the same time. It's just one of the most iconic movie designs that I'd ever seen. Plus, I was doing a little bit of research today. There's a documentary called Memory, I think it's what it's called, The Making of Aliens. And it talks about how the design was influenced by even Egyptian sort of design aesthetics. And it was part of like a Lovecraftian exhibit, or parts of it were, when H.R. Geiger was alive. And when he finally met Dan O'Bannon, they just really kind of hit it off. I also found out there was a little bit more research about it as I was kind of digging into it today when Dan O'Bannon was designing the creature, how a lot of it came from a story called Seeds of Jupiter that was in DC Comics, where basically this thing inhabits your, like, it's this creature that grows inside you. And there's a lot of examples of this in the insect world, particularly with wasps. And I think that's another reason why I'm really attracted to this movie, is there's so much real world elements to it, and the creature's life cycle is terrifying. I like how there's a pseudo-sexual theme to it, as well as essentially the movie's about rape, if you want to break it down, if you want to really get into the psychology of it. And I really dig that.
Rip that Band-Aid off.
Oh yeah, I dig that too. Like, we as a man are being violated in the most visceral and disgusting way, and there's nothing we can do. And there's something about that powerless feeling that really gets me as a storyteller, that I really dig this monster.
Well, see, one of the things that I love about Alien, and it's something that's missing from the sequels, is Alien was not afraid to be a slow burn throughout. Like, Aliens is a great film. The first sequel, it's a great film. I'm not saying that, but there a lot of the moments where there's horror, it's very pedal to the metal and very fast paced. Whereas with the original film, it's all about that slow burn tension. It's all anticipation with it, and it just builds to a crescendo. And like, it's not afraid to be a slow burn, high tension film. And it's something that you don't really see much anymore. And I don't know if it's because we as an audience, our attention spans have been shortened or something, but I don't really see a whole lot of horror films that are willing to go slowly and take the time to build their world and to build their tension until it's just right at that point where you just can't bear it anymore. It seems like a lot of horror films just kind of want to barrel to the end of it, if that makes any real sense.
Well, yeah, because Alien came out at a time where it was just at the ass end of the 1970s, and Alien has a lot more in common with early sci-fi movies of the 1970s, but they started to blend in the horror a little bit kind of later on, because it rides this fine line between Stanley Kubrick science fiction, where it's very hard sci-fi, and then there just happens to be a monster. And Ridley Scott, I remember, I think I heard this somewhere, that he fought with the studio. The studio was like, well, nothing happens for like 45 minutes. And you're right, because the way that he shot this movie, that camera never stops moving. So he wanted you to feel like the ship was always doing something, like you were always in the scene, even if the camera was just adjusting, like, say, Dallas is talking or Parker is talking. It always wanted you to feel in the scene. And Ridley Scott really made a true haunted house movie in space, and it came out at just the right time, because you look at the other kind of alien movies that had come out, like we'd had Star Wars, we'd had Starman, Encounters of the Third Kind, and they were different types of sci-fi. We never had a true monster. We never had something that was destructive, that was parasitic, that was vile, that was a perversion.
We'd had them, but they've been relegated to, like, B-movie schlock stuff like This Island Earth or Creature from the Black Lagoon, or stuff that very hard to take seriously. But Alien, and it's one of those things that they talk about in a documentary that came with the Alien Anthology Blu-ray set, where they talk about, like, this script on its surface it could very easily have been a B movie, but because it had that perfect storm of creative talent in Ridley Scott and H.R. Geiger and Dan O'Bannon, who really fought for it, that it became the A-level movie that it is. And it's real easy to see, even watching the film, just how it kind of teeters on that knife's edge of being a B movie schlock or an A movie great.
Yeah, because this movie originally had a budget under, I think, $2 million. And then once Ridley Scott had said, this is friggin' fantastic, the budget jumped to $10 million, I think.
It started at 4.2, and then after Ridley Scott signed on, it jumped up to 8.4.
Yeah, so
in US dollars.
Yeah, like it got more and more expensive. So, and then it got more and more people involved in it, like Tom Skerritt, who plays Dallas. Again, like, you started getting more and more people on board, and this cast also made this movie work. Like, there wasn't anybody who was like, I mean, they're all attractive people in their own way, but they look like people you'd see on the street. They're not your Han Solos, your Luke Skywalkers, or your Charlton Heston from, Planet of the Apes or something like that. You had something that looked different, and this movie played a lot of misdirection, because Ripley was not intended to be the main character. It's not until the last act of the film, oh shit, she's one of the last ones left. Like, it's wonderful what they do with this, and the movie never talks down to you. That's something else that I appreciate too. It also gave you the evil robot in Ash. I love that. Plus, that visual design for him with the white blood was so cool. It also gave
blood, the muscle and pasta. Yeah, Ian Holm was the casting in this film was just great in general. Nobody gives a bad performance, and with the exception of Yaphet Kotto, who played Parker, I think it was Parker, and I don't remember seeing him in anything else. But like, these are all people who would go on to be big names. You got Harry Dean Stanton, Ian Holm, John Hurt, obviously Sigourney Weaver. Who this was actually her very first film, and like, goddamn, you want to talk about hitting the ground running. But the thing that I love so much about the film is, like you mentioned, it's an ensemble piece. No one is really overshadowing anybody. Everybody gets kind of equal screen time, and it really feels like this is a group that's trying to survive, as opposed to a lot of horror films. It's like, oh, there's the final girl, and then these other people who kind of orbit around her. And I just love how these people play off of each other and how they react to each other. Like, one of my favorite scenes in the film is when Kane first gets implanted with the alien, and he and Dallas are in the airlock, and Dallas is arguing with Ripley, look, you need to open this goddamn door and let us in. And Ripley's like, no, we've got quarantine procedures. And Lambert just fucking loses her shit and like just bitch slaps Ripley, because like, no, you almost let these people die. And it's great to see how each of these characters, they're actual characters with personality and motivations, and not just person number 3 who gets killed.
Yeah, and if that's something that we can look as a lesson in 2020, when Ripley says, we break quarantine, we die. Isn't that prophetic? Yeah, like there's a lot of real life to these people, and even to the point where Kane's eating dinner, like, you don't think anything's wrong. This creature just falls off of his face and dies, and nothing's wrong. And they start examining the body, and then Ian Holm says, or Ripley says, well, what is it? I don't want this thing on my ship. Get it off. And Ian Holmes says, well, I'm pretty sure it's not a zombie. So there's so many great lines, and just the chemistry between this cast works. Plus, one thing that I love about this movie, it's the design of the sets and the props. This movie, like Star Wars, really got the used future look. Where Star Wars, you look at, say, the Falcon, you look at Mos Eisley, for example, it looks futuristic, but kind of not. It looks kind of run down. There's dust and shit everywhere. Alien has the same, it's very industrial looking, very metallic, this could be an oil refinery, because that's what the Nostromo and the Narcissus were. They were essentially just an oil refinery with a truck attached to it in space, hauling like 20 million tons of ore. For Wayland Yutani, which at that time didn't even have a name. I think it was just called The Company. I don't think they named it until Aliens. And yeah, like it's cool that they did so much with so little, because this world didn't need to expand. And you look at how big the franchise has gotten now, and Ridley Scott didn't get asked back for the sequel. Like he said, he wasn't asked in like an interview, I think in like the mid 2000s, said they didn't even ask him. And this movie stands as one of the most important films in horror movie history, in sci-fi history, for all that it has accomplished. Plus, it's got a really well-used musical score that doesn't overstay its welcome. It plays really well with sound design. The lighting is fantastic in this. Like, you never clearly see the alien except only for a few choice shots. And when you do, it really knows how to play up the horror and the scare. Like the point where the alien uses its jaws to kill Harry Dean Stanton's character, and it pulls him up, and then the camera cuts back to Jonesy the cat kind of watching this. How that scene is cut together is, I think, absolutely gorgeous.
Fun fact about that scene. You actually see the alien in full view of the camera before it actually makes its kill. You can actually spot it when what's his name? What's
I forget it. I forget.
I always forget his name.
Harry Dean Stanton.
When Harry Dean Stanton goes down to look for Jones the cat, and he's kind of walking in that cargo bay, you can actually see the alien hanging from the ceiling in full view of the camera. But because of its design and the design of the set around it, it looks just like piping. And I think that really speaks to sort of the genius of H.R. Geiger's design of this thing, that, you know, alien is really the only way to really describe it. You know, you can look at other, say, sci-fi aliens, like, oh, well, you know, this alien looks like a dog, or it looks like a fish, or it looks like a gorilla. You can't really make any sort of comparison like that with the xenomorph, because its design is so otherworldly and strange that it truly is the definition of alien. It is beyond our understanding. So, and it's really easy to see where that came from if you look at any of other H.R. Geiger's works, because, whoo boy, I do not want to see what went on inside that man's head, if his artwork is any indication.
Yeah, like that guy, before he passed away, had contributed some wonderful pieces of artwork that really challenged the imagination to what was strange, beautiful, and wonderful. Like I said, being very biomechanical, being also very sexual at times as well. And it's something that I really thought was something rather inspired at the time. And it's definitely kind of carried forward, because the alien design has been copied. Hell, you can see the alien xenomorph on Animaniacs in the 90s and on like Tiny Toons at like certain points. It's made its way into pop
Mortal
culture.
Kombat.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's invaded pop culture. Hell, there was a line of toys when this movie came out, and they're incredibly rare. Now they've been re-released by companies like NECA, which have done wonderful sculpts of them. Like, they look amazing. They're expensive, but they are worth it. There's been some pretty cool kind of prop replicas that have come from some fairly high-end makers. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but I know I've seen Ripley's flamethrower. I know props from this movie have come up for sale in some of those really big auctions, and they go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know the guy who designed the ships, Ron Cobb, I want to say his name was, passed away recently. And you never see spaceships designed like this, like industrial, like truly. And the Alien universe has always had a very unique look about it. Now, I know Kat, for example, has been very quiet during this conversation because we're mostly talking about the first Alien. But looking at the look of the Aliens universe, you could tell Alien and Aliens happen in the same world.
Yeah, I mean, so the reason I've been quiet is because I haven't seen the original Alien. But I thought I would stick around and pop in and like pose some questions as they come up. So I guess one of my questions, since I haven't seen the original Alien, and it's been a long time since I've seen Aliens, what year is this supposed to take place?
Actually, I just posted that to Facebook. I'm glad you mentioned that. Alien happens in, let me see, 2122 is when the first Alien happens, and then Aliens happens, and I want to say 2186 or something like that. That's the Haley's Hope incident on LV-426, I think.
Yeah, because there's that 57-year time skip.
What? So, you know, like a lot of horror is reactionary to what's happening in the real world. You know, so like obviously there's a lot of like sexual violence kind of portrayed in this film, like metaphored in this film. So like, is there a particular like real life inspiration for making this film? Like zombies are a thing because of other things happening in the real world. So is there a real world reason for this film? Or was this just like, oh shit, this is just really cool looking alien?
I know
it really sort of the germ of the idea came from one of the producers. I can't remember his name, but one of the producers came up with the idea of the alien gestating inside a human person. The psychosexual aspect that really didn't enter in until H.R. Giger got involved, because as I mentioned, he was one of those artists. If you ever looked up his work, he set out to disturb people with his artwork, and he actually says as much in the documentary. He said the idea of having this creature have that sexual aspect to it, and having it attack men in this fashion, you know, it was something that he hadn't seen done, and he knew that it would be disturbing. So it was really something. There wasn't really any real world metaphor that was being made. It was just Giger just being fucked up. So
there's something about this movie, and I've seen it pop up in the last year or so. There's something in Aliens, and it's referenced, and it would tie back to Alien, and it's the character of Lambert. And there's some pretty compelling evidence that the character may be what's the term? Transgendered of some type. Like they may have transitioned from male to female, or maybe in the alien universe that's just a thing. And whoever wrote the character, I don't know whether that was their intention, but if you look at in the background of Aliens, they make a clear reference in the file that pops up on the screen. And if that was the intent back in 1970 something, that is really forward thinking, and that's a real something to be commended. And I think that's something that Veronica Cartwright did right with her performance as Lambert, being a particularly strong character, although she doesn't have a great end to her character. In fact, there's actually a book that came out from Titan Books this last year. It's called Aliens, 40 Years, 40 Artists. And there's a piece of artwork in there that shows what happens to Lambert when you see the alien's tail crawl up, and you can guess what's going to happen to poor Lambert. And it's pretty disturbing and fucked up to say anything. But it's a gorgeous artwork book, though. There's some wonderful pieces in there.
See, Lambert is a character that I actually did a 180 on, because I didn't like her for the longest time, because her role in this film, much of what she does in this film, is basically just she's there to be scared. And I kind of thought that was kind of lazy writing, and in some ways it still is. But the fringe brilliance of it was kind of revealed to me in watching the documentary in anticipation of this episode, where it said that, in every horror film, there's got to be that one character who represents the audience's fears.
Yes.
And Lambert was that character for this film. So while I'm still not particularly enamored of her character and the actions that she takes in this film, I now understand why she was written the way that she was. Although in that vein, one thing that I found very interesting about Alien, and as far as its production, was none of the characters were written specifically to be men or women. The casting notes said, all parts are to be audition unisex, although try and have a couple of women in there. So Ripley, was not intended to be female. Lambert was not intended to be female. None of the characters were written or were conceived as being either male or female. So the casting was genuinely unisex, and I feel like that really contributed to the final casting on this. That they just said, okay, well, anyone who it was genuinely blind casting. Look, anyone wants to come in and read for one of these characters, they can, and we'll just pick the best person. And we kind of roll our eyes at that today because it's kind of people are saying they want that, kind of generally want something else. But this was a case of that actually happening, and we got a really bang up cast out of it. And I think that really contributed a lot to the greatness of the final product. Was that these are characters where they were characters first, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Yes, I mean, one of the strongest things about these movies in the Alien universe is men and women are fairly equal. Ripley has been one of my favorite fictional heroes of all time since the 1980s. She wasn't Sarah Connor, but she was capable. She just was a strong person. I didn't see a sex there. She just was strong, capable. She did what she had to do, and I always found that very, very, very admirable. And in this, she was very logical. She thought it through. She didn't let panic get the better of her, and she was smart. And that's one thing that I really appreciated about it too. And I think that's something that the Alien universe will be remembered for, is it does have very strong roots in being equal. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, there isn't a lot of really negative things I can say about the Alien universe unless we get into extended media. But the first movie set the franchise up. Now, Ridley Scott's later efforts with Prometheus and Covenant, maybe we'll talk about those in a few years.
Alien Covenant broke my heart.
There were parts of it that I liked, but I didn't like it as a whole. One of the things I like that Alien brought up was artificial intelligence when it came to Mother, when it came to Ash, and stuff like that. Because you never really saw bad robots like that before, at least murderous robots. I don't know. That's just a random thought in the ether there. I guess my question will be to Kat here. You've heard me and Gonzo wax philosophical and talk about some of the production aspects of this. What would attract you to potentially watch these movies or to not watch these movies? I mean, we've talked about monsters, we've talked about actors, actresses, storylines, themes. Does this sound like something you would possibly dig in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. One, because it is a slow burn with a monster, and I actually really enjoy that in a film. In terms of horror, I like a slow burn. I'm not sure that I really appreciate the sexual aspect to the violence and the metaphor of that, but I really, really dig Geiger's designs. I really think that they are the xenomorph is a really interesting looking creature. Compared to, because we know that it's a guy in a suit, but it is the least looking guy in a suit for a guy in a suit. So I'm always really intrigued at the absolute horror of the appearance of the creature itself. And I like that it's a slow burn, that it works its way out, because that's sort of Jaws-y, the idea of like there's a monster out there and we know it and we just haven't seen it yet, is something that I really, really like, and I think it makes for a very good suspenseful film with like less of the actual like gore and violence, even though it does get that way. But I think I'm very, very intrigued by the character of Ripley, because I know that the future films don't always do Ripley justice, but Ripley has always been this sort of not even quite a feminist icon. She's just like, when you think of like who's a badass woman in film, like Ripley is top tier, because she's just so great. Like she's not like a John McClane, where you're like, not a John McClane, but like a Jason Bourne, where like, oh, she's not this like specialist who can do anything and is just so ridiculously like skilled at everything. She's kind of like a normal person who rises above in a really just shitty situation. And to me, those are always more interesting heroes than a Jason Bourne kind of hero. So I really like Ripley. Like I said, I've seen Aliens. It's just been a little while, but I loved her in Aliens, because that is definitely a movie experience that a lot of people can get behind of, I know what I'm talking about and no one is listening to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about Ripley, and this is something that I've mentioned a bit in passing on the show, but I really, and I'm trying to think of a way to word this, because I have to word this very carefully. But I don't like female characters who are written to be feminist icons. Like that's their goal, is to be the feminist icon. And even though I love that even though Ripley is held up as one, that wasn't why she was conceived. She was like we mentioned, she was written to be a character first. And it actually led to a funny moment with Ridley Scott, where someone, I can't remember who it was, but some major women's lib writer cornered him and asked him about, oh, well, how did you conceive of Ripley as being this great feminist character? And Ridley Scott just shrugged and said, I didn't. The role was unisex. Sigourney Weaver just walked in and gave the best audition. And I like that. Basically, Ripley's not a character that panders. That's the word I'm looking for. She's not a character that panders. She's a strong character in her own right with an interesting story to tell, and she's not there to prove a point, as it were, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. The thing about Ripley that always kind of got to me as a child and now as an adult, Ripley's the type of character I would trust to follow. Not because she is John McClane or Jean-Claude Van Damme. She isn't some super mercenary or whatever. She's capable, she's brave, she's competent, but she's someone who inspires confidence. And that's through will of charisma, willpower, and just being able to keep a cool head despite bad things happening to her. Yeah, she gets scared. Yeah, she recognizes when a situation is going south, but you want to follow her. And I think that's the power of Sigourney Weaver's performance, is she really did come in and give the best audition. But
and again, has to be said, first film ever. Before this, she'd only been on Broadway. This is literally her film debut.
Yeah, like she has just this force of will in this movie that it's fantastic. And obviously, as she moves on through Aliens, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection, to lesser degrees, but this really paved a lot of roles in Hollywood for people to say, man, that's awesome. I want to be like Ripley. And she'll always be one of my favorite heroes next to Commander Shepard and Sarah Connor. So
yeah, I've always said that Ripley was to films what Samus Aran was to video games. Like the first real female horror action star that was actually done well. And yeah, I'm sorry, Kat, you're about to say something?
I was just going to round it too. So we've kind of we've mentioned that this was a really culturally important film. So how did this particular movie sort of change the face of film as we know it? Because we've seen it referenced in a lot of other shows, and everybody knows what it is, but what sort of impact
did it have, other than jump-starting Sigourney Weaver's really incredible career? She's probably an actual goddess walking on Earth, just putting that out there.
It showed that you could do a horror monster movie and do it well. It didn't have to be B-movie schlock, because, like I said, but prior to this point, you thought of, horror monsters. You thought of, the guy in the rubber suit, like This Island Earth, or, Forbidden Planet. Stuff that's, like, really cheesy and looks really fake. But, if Star Wars showed that you could do sci-fi believably and with a good budget and have it work, Alien showed that you could do the same thing with a monster movie. Because, from this, after Alien, you started seeing monster films taken a lot more seriously. And horror films in general were elevated after this one. I would say Alien and Texas Chainsaw Massacre really did the most to elevate horror as a genre from being just some schlocky thing that you would see in a drive-in to actual serious cinema. And it's actually kind of interesting that those two films are the ones that are elevated, because they both have these really bloody reputations of being huge gore fests. But I can't really speak to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but aside from the chestburster scene, Alien is actually pretty bloodless. Like, I'm racking my brain, and I can't think of a moment outside of the chestburster scene where there's any real gore or blood. And
Harry Dean Stanton's head bite scene.
You see, even that I don't remember. I remember it being frightening but I think that was more to do with the editing. I don't remember any actual blood.
Yeah, if you go back and watch that scene, you do see the jaws hit his head, and you do see a rather large impact into the skull.
Yeah, but
pretty
and I
tame,
think
though.
All
things considered.
And Alien
for the time period.
And Alien is a film that really runs on less is more. Like, I think we only see the actual xenomorph, I think, a total of like 6 times throughout the whole movie, and we never actually stop to get a good look at it, which is, a damn shame. And again, going back to how you can do this and do it well, we talk about how previous monster films were just a guy in a rubber suit. Well, so is this movie. And by the way, the story about how they found the guy to wear the rubber suit is absolutely hysterical. The guy who, in the documentary in the Alien Anthology, the guy who found the actor to play the alien, he said, it was like that old joke. I just saw this guy in a bar, walked up to him and said, "Hey, how'd you like to be in movies?"
Can you even imagine? I was Googling this guy while you guys were talking, and apparently he's like 6'10", and they were like, well, that's the tallest guy I've ever seen. Better go see if he wants to be in a film.
Yeah, and it was literally just one of the producers was in a bar, and he happened to look over and see this guy and just walked up and was like, "Hey, how'd you like to be in pictures?"
And then
Nice.
like, pretty much his only film. And it's actually like, I just read up on this actor, and he actually died really young, and it's super, super depressing.
So...
looking at this movie, I think it's culturally significant because it made the idea that you could put horror into any setting and make it work. This was a haunted house in space. And it's something that had never really been done before, especially on a big studio budget with a respected director. And it looked not like anything that had been seen before. It mixed how camera work had been done. Like I said, the ship is always moving. You always get the sense of motion going on in the Nostromo. Lighting was a character in this. When you look at how, as Gonzo mentioned, when the alien is in the engine room and it's not moving, that lighting is a character there, because lighting is hiding that creature right in plain sight and you don't see it. Tension is something that plays with you. And I can't think of many sci-fi movies that really ramp up the tension in your heart that made you scared. This gave birth to sci-fi horror in a way that had never really been done before. And obviously a landmark in creature design, creature movement. And as you say, less is more. By not showing the xenomorph in a full glory, quote unquote, money shot, by using the lighting and the shadows, you really create this really stark contrast on screen where it really gets your imagination going, especially with those biomechanical lines going throughout the suit, which they would later refine in Aliens. It really made the monster really pop. It was something scary. It was something cool. And I think this is going to be one of the most iconic movie monsters ever designed. And I hope we see this again now that Disney has the rights to the Alien franchise. I know Marvel Comics has the rights to publish now that Dark Horse no longer has them. And I hope we see more things like this. I know, as one of my closing thoughts on this, there's a video game called Alien Isolation that came out mid 2010s, like 2014, 2015. It's available on every major platform, and it's not like Aliens Colonial Marines. Thank Christ for that. But you have guns. They don't do shit against it. This alien will kill you in one shot. You literally have to hide from this thing. It stalks you. It hunts you. This game is legitimately scary. I got jumped in an air vent and I threw my controller across the room because I didn't see it coming. And that's great. Man, I should have mentioned that for favorite horror games. But yeah, like there are like this creature inspires fear. I love that. And the fact that even if you try to kill it, it bleeds acid for blood, which means it can kill you in its death throes. How many monsters can say that?
Yeah, to kind of sum up my closing thoughts, I mean, this movie, you know, you talk about how some movies are like perfect storms. This was one of them. If any one element of this movie did not turn out as it wound up turning out, it would not have worked. Like, this really is a film that just balances on that knife's edge and does so wonderfully. And it's, like I said, it's the only horror movie that I watched that still scares me as much today after I've seen it maybe 100 times, you know, and worn out the DVD. I'm not kidding. I wore out the DVD of the Alien quadrilogy that I got in like 2005, and that's why I was so happy when the anthology came out on Blu-ray, because I just watched this movie so much and I love it so much. But it's the only horror movie that still scares me as much today as it did the first time I saw it. And it's my favorite horror movie of all time. And like I said, this episode has really been a good way for me to unpack what it is about this film that I love and to quantify it. And so yeah, I guess
now,
Kat, what are your final thoughts on this whole discussion?
I don't have too much in the way of final thoughts. I did just recently watch somebody doing a playthrough of Alien Isolation, and that was fucking terrifying. God, why does anybody play these games? I had one more question. Isn't this year an anniversary?
That was last year.
Last year. Okay, I couldn't remember why we picked this topic, so I thought it might have been an anniversary year.
We picked this topic because I tried to do it last year, got shot down, and got fed up and said, "Look, we're doing it. No arguments."
Right. So, I just think that this is, even though I haven't indulged in it a lot outside of watching Aliens a long time ago and my brother having all of those toys we talked about, like it's such an important franchise because it's one of the most easily recognizable monsters of all time. I think it's such good, I don't want to say branding, but it's really kind of branding, that, you know, you just look at it and you know, oh, that's the alien from Aliens. And you can contort it into any different way or look at it from any angle and you're like, that's the fucking alien, and I'm terrified of it. I just think it's such a striking design, and I feel like it's such a lasting franchise, even though they really it hasn't always been done the best. You know, it's one of those things where Alien and Aliens are just so good that anything that comes after will have a really hard time living up to it. And I just think that's such a unique thing for horror from the 70s and 80s to be capped out. Like they've maximized this is as good as it's going to get, and it happened in the 70s and 80s. Are you kidding me? Because it was such a time for bad horror, or like the
Schlocky.
Sort of like hockey, like slasher horror, which this almost feels like a slasher film, but there's a monster and it's in space. I think that's what I really like about the concept of a slow burn, is you get sort of Nightmare on Elm Street feel to it, but with a much cooler looking creature.
Maybe maybe check it out, and we'll follow up with you on a future episode on what your thoughts of the film are.
Yeah, I think my brother's got a copy of it that I'd have to actually interact with him at some point during this pandemic to get a copy of. That's part of my problem is I don't own a copy of it, and I just didn't have the time to go out and like find one or find a place to stream it from. So, yeah, but it's really interesting to hear what you guys like about it, because I think everybody likes something different about Alien. But the impact is all the same. It's horrifying and it's culturally significant. And I think that if anything from the 70s and 80s can come away with that and have that still remain in 2020, I think that's pretty impressive.
Now, I've been saving this up as we begin to exit this episode.
Okay.
I have a personal connection to this franchise.
Oh boy.
So I recently found out. So a few weeks ago on Twig, I've reviewed the Alien RPG, a supplement for it known as Destroyer of Worlds, which is an adventure set after the events of LV-426 or Aliens. I'm a character in Aliens now. I am named. I am Colonial Marshal Mike Dodd. I am officially canon in the Alien universe, which I think is pretty fucking kick-ass. My name is in print in thousands of books across the world right now.
That's pretty cool.
I know, and I don't make it out of this in a very nice way. Spoiler alert. But yeah, it's pretty cool. If you want to pick up the Alien RPG, it's done by Free League Publishing. You can go to Drive-Thru RPG. You can go to Amazon. It's a fantastic game. I would love to play it with you guys at some point. So yeah, but just go check that out.
Maybe we'll do a one-shot for Fools Who Ride. But
I
anyway,
would absolutely do that.
But anyway, that is all the time that we have for Nerd to the Third Power this week. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will see you guys next time. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm the cat.
I'm still the onboard synthetic.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. Taka, play us out.